Next up, we have Dave Snider with Tsunami Safety and Alerting Challenges for Prince William Sound. So more on tsunami. And heads up after that, we're going to have a concurrent session of more talk about tsunami safety. I also want to remind everybody that all these are being recorded. So if you have a session in the concurrent part that you didn't see, either online or here in person, we'll have them up on the Prince William Sound Stewardship Foundation website in the next week or so, and you'll be able to pick and click. If you didn't see the Kittless Merlick talk or the invasive species talk, which was both of them were excellent, you'll be able to see those in a couple of weeks.
They're on Crowdcast.
Crowdcast.
They can watch them on Crowdcast today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Betsy. So yeah, they'll be Crowdcast right away or in a couple of weeks on our website. So I'll turn over to Dave. Thanks, Dave.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I have some pretty pictures for you here in just a moment. But in the meantime, how many of you have been out to Barry Arm ever? Nice. Okay. I've been fortunate enough to be out there twice, and all for tsunami reconnaissance work or installation of gauges there. And for the bird people, I'll throw a little bone out there, or maybe a breadcrumb. The first time I was out there, I think there were about 1,000 surfbirds at our southernmost gauge installation point. It was spectacular. So better than 1,000 starlings, that's for sure. Oh, you're good. And, oh, Lonnie, this is for you. Similes or analogies, right? Largest man-made structure, or at least one of them, Pyramid of Giza. The volume of Barry Arm is about 205 pyramids of Giza. Does that work? It's a lot of rock. All three? I think the big one, the Great Pyramid of Giza. So just the one. Not that it matters if it all drops in the water, though, right?
I think your clicker will work. Give it a shot.
All right, let's see. That's me. My email's under there somewhere, but that's okay. You can find me later. There it is. Cool. Ruby. Let's see what happens. Aha, look at that. Cool. So I'm Dave Snider. I am the Tsunami Warning Coordinator for the National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska, of course. And I'm going to throw you a big curveball here. I'm actually a meteorologist. I have nothing to do with earth science at all. That's not true. My job is to help explain it. And that's why they brought me on the team. So I'm here to make sure that our partners, like you, from everyone from the Forest Service and the city of Whittier, and the state of Alaska Emergency Services, Alaska Command, who I was meeting with today, everybody has what they need from us so they can make better, faster, timely decisions to help keep all of us out of the way, right? So our overall mission is to provide timely, reliable, and accurate forecasts. So we're really set up to do the big tsunami picture. But here we are in Whittier, Alaska, talking about a very local response to a very relatively small problem when you think about all the world's oceans and all the things that can disrupt all of the water around the world. So my job here today is to help you have the information that you need so that you understand the problem and can react to the problem to keep you, your teams, and anybody else you're guiding safe. So a quick tour of the National Tsunami Warning Center system for the United States. It's simply this. We have two centers, all in all, at about 40 people total. That's not a lot of people working on the tsunami problem around the world for the United States anyway, and that's a lot of water to cover. So we have the National Tsunami Warning Center up here and the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center in Honolulu, Hawaii. Basically, we divvy up the mission in a domestic and international line. So the National Tsunami Warning Center here at home is focused on the contiguous 48 states, plus Alaska and our friends up north in Canada. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center is really focused on Hawaii, the Pacific Islands and territories there, and they serve a broader international mission with advising many of our partner countries there across the Pacific that don't have the capability of warning and detecting as we do. So we help serve that mission in an advisement role for them. It's really difficult to keep people interested and aware of the tsunami problem. We call it a HILP problem, a high impact, low probability event, right? Tsunamis don't happen every day, and that's okay. But for awareness, that's really hard if you can't put it in front of their face every 5 minutes and go, look, it's right here, it's going to bite you, right? So just in the last couple of years, we've had a lot of high impact, low probability events, unfortunately, right? And there's pandemic, there's COVID. We've had a volcanic eruption just in January, the Tonga eruption there, created a tsunami as well. So got a double one out of that. And then, of course, we've had a meteor strike. We have meteor strikes all the time. The trick is, are they big enough to cause an impact, right? And according to our friends at NASA, there was a giraffe-sized meteor that hit the Arctic Ocean not that long ago. So there's another analogy for you, right? Can we not use metric? Let's use metric, right? Giraffe-sized meteor, right? Yeah, there's the meme right there. Yeah, that's how they compared it. So we need to work with NASA on some better comparisons, right? Okay, but source types, the tsunami warning system's fundamentally set up to monitor for seismic sources. That is a earthquake-driven disturbance underneath the ocean that lifts a large volume of water all at once and then sends out ripples across the pond and hits our coastlines where we live, right? That's why we're here. The problem is that's not the total problem. That's only about 85% or so of our seismic problem. So generally speaking, seismic data is a really good indicator for finding the problem and letting you know, is this going to be a problem for you? But it's also very difficult for us for the last 15% of that to get the job done to 100%. And Barry Arm fits in that puzzle. It is tricky, tricky business. So here's a look at our watch floor. Eventually, after we can get a little bit further down the road into safe territory, I'd invite all of you to come by for some of our public open house tours. We're not quite back to that phase just yet, but usually on Fridays, we have historically had an open house, so make sure you keep an eye on that. There's a look at the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center on the left and our National Tsunami Warning Center on the right. Chris Popham on the right side there is looking at some seismograms and monitoring a quake there. It looks like in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is another tricky spot. We have to monitor the Caribbean, which is an international partner, which is the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center in the Atlantic. And then we also have to watch Florida, which is our mission. So we've got a lot of crossover and kind of weird spots there, but we all have to work together to get the job done for everybody. And the really important part is we need to get the first message out in 5 minutes or less. Now, when you're trying to make a decision of yes or no, think about all the things that you think about carefully during your day that might be urgent, might be critical, and you have to make a decision that'll change the rest of your life and the course of your day, 5 minutes or less. Most of those probably aren't high impact, right? Probably high probability too. Flip that the other way and think about something that has a lot more impact. You usually think about those things a little bit longer, don't you? Yeah, so 5 minutes or less. When you're here in Alaska, you're going to see earthquake information come out from a lot of different places all at once. That's going to be the National Tsunami Warning Center. You're probably going to see something from the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center at the same time if it's big enough. The USGS National Earthquake Information Center has the official lead on earthquake information for the whole country. And here serving that mission for the USGS is the Alaska Earthquake Center. So everybody's got a role to play in this, but we're all doing it for different reasons. Each group is analyzing the quake for a different end goal. And at the end of the day, as I said, the GS has the final say on how big and where and how deep the earthquake was. The Tsunami Warning Center system only cares about one thing. Did it make a wave, right? And so as we take our first guess in that first 5 minutes, we're making our best guess, but we refine that as we go into the next hour or so, as we get more information about what really happened. And that takes time. But when you see all these different messages coming across the system initially, you're seeing a lot of different numbers. And if you're trying to decide, is this a big quake, one that I care about, a 7.2 sounds a lot different than an 8.2, sounds a lot different than a 9.2, right? And you'll see that number change in big quakes because the earth is not done breaking in that first 5 minutes in the great quakes. So watch for more information. And if you're going to make a decision, focus on the message that we're sending for water, which is a tsunami alert, a warning, a watch, an advisory, or an information statement that simply says, it's okay. We're not expecting a problem with this. But focus on the message and not the magnitude if you're making a tsunami decision. And again, those will come out in the first 5 minutes, and they may change over time, just as weather does. As we go through a weather event, you might see, hey, it looks like it's going to snow in about 5 to 7 days. We'll let you know. And then a couple days later, hey, there's a winter storm watch. Looks like it's really going to snow. We're pretty sure, but we're not 100% sure. But keep watching the space. And 24 hours out, they'll say it's a winter storm warning. In fact, it might even be a blizzard. This is a big deal. And you're going to start adjusting your plans. But you've already started thinking about that process. The tsunami process starts with the earthquake for the most part. And we have to do that entire spin-up process in that first 5 minutes and then adjust forward rather than get you prepared in the first 5 to 7 days like weather. Tricky, tricky stuff. So here's some quick tsunami basics. Every tsunami is different. There you go. I'm done. Okay, maybe not. Know where you are, right? Know what type of risk you are in when you're there. And know that Whittier is different than Valdez, is different than Chuniga, is different than Titlik, right? Every single place is different. The coastline is different. The bathymetry under the water is different. And every seismic source or concern for tsunami is going to be different. And that's tricky to understand, right? Because everybody wants to know yes or no, and especially in that first 5 minutes. So what can we do in Prince William Sound? Well, the easiest rule for you to follow is know the natural warning signs, especially for local source tsunamis like Barry Arm. If you see the water doing something strange, you know the tide cycles. Everybody that lives in Prince William Sound that's on the water knows what a normal water level looks like. Knows when the waves are blowing the wrong way, knows when the weather's doing something weird. Pay attention to that. We step away from our natural senses a lot because we have science. And there's nothing wrong with understanding the science, but when we step away from those natural warning signs, that's when we get in danger, right? So pay attention to what's really going on around you. And when something's not right, doesn't feel right, doesn't sound right, doesn't look right, use that as your signal to get away from the water. 1 mile in, 100 feet up. Sometimes that's going to be really hard to do in Prince William Sound, right? But go as far as you can. If you're in cell phone or radio range, there's other tools that we can provide through technology, right? Wireless emergency alerts will help pass on a tsunami warning, but that's the only one that's going to go across your cell phone automatically on the cell system. And not every carrier is going to do it the same way. If you're on AT&T, GCI might do it different. If you're on GCI, you might not get it on AT&T. And what if you're tied into Cordova Wireless? It's hard to know. And I can't speak for the companies on how they pass on that signal. I hope they're all passing it on to your phone when it counts. It'll be on TV, so if you're in Whittier, you might be able to see it that way. Telephone notifications, if you're tied into a system there like Nixle or something else, that'll go across the radio. Channel 16 from the Coast Guard will help. And of course, outdoor sirens. There's at least one here now. There's another one going in, I think, a little bit further down the road in the coming months. And that's all part of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's grant funding through a program called the National Tsunami Hazard Mitigation Program. That's coordination through the states, through partner agencies, and through groups like Whittier. Out in the big ocean, a tsunami works with the earthquake disturbing the bottom of the water and pushing that entire water column up, making a ripple that spreads out and wide, hundreds of miles an hour across the ocean. As it gets closer to the coast, the conservation of momentum and physical properties that you learned in high school compress that wave and start building that up into a larger moving column of water. It slows down, and that's when the inundation occurs, right? That's going to all happen here in Prince William Sound with a local Barry Arm landslide tsunami. But it's going to be a lot faster when that happens because the source is much closer to Whittier. Travel time is about 20 minutes instead of something that might take hours to cross the entire Pacific Ocean. That whole process could play out here in about 20 to 22 minutes. That's not a lot of time to react. If you think about making that quick decision in under 5 minutes and then starting to pick up the phone and call people and then actually moving out of the way yourself, you've exhausted 30 minutes probably pretty quickly. Think about a wildfire situation, finding out that it's happening on the South Hillside last night and trying to determine, is this blowing my way and do I need to start getting my stuff together and getting out of town? That was probably more like an hour, right? It's hard to make fast decisions in critical moments like that. So we're working with a lot of people to get this right. State of Alaska, Whittier, the USGS, you heard Dr. Staley speak this morning, I hope. The Coast Guard, our friends at the Forest Service, we can't do it without you. And we have a lot of people that are becoming more and more interested in the problem. In fact, I mentioned talking to Alaska Command today. This fall, we're going to be working on a full-scale exercise here the first week of September that is helping to coordinate response agencies, everything from search and rescue to actually getting people out of the water and to hospitals the first week of September, just to make sure that everybody understands what we're talking about when we say the Barry Arm landslide tsunami problem. When we're talking about what the water looks like underneath, it's really important. We were just talking about moraines a few minutes ago. One of the things that I've heard a lot in town from a lot of different people that we've talked to is, well, there is a moraine right there when you go into Barry Arm. Is that going to stop the tsunami? The answer is we think no. We got the NOAA ship Fairweather, I think. Was it Fairweather or Rainier? I think maybe it was the Rainier. The Rainier came up here and did a rapid survey back in 2020, the fall of 2020. And we got new information about what the water looks like. Now that the glacier has pulled away, we understand what the ocean floor looks like. And we understand that there's enough water to move. And with enough rock, that water can move up over the moraine and then down into Port Wells and then make the curve. And yes, tsunami waves do bounce off the coastlines and they do round corners and they will get up here into the Whittier Harbor. So there's a look at some of the initial information there. And this is all public data. So if you want to dig around, I can send you some links and you can look at all the water level information yourself. And you can see the moraine there. But all of this is a new information because the glacier is on the move. So how are we monitoring this? Pretty simply, actually. We're putting a pressure transducer underneath the water, running a cable up to a transmitter higher up on the hill. That bounces its way through a cell phone signal to Point Pakenham, which is a pretty popular spot if you've ever kayaked. I think that's where I saw the surfbirds, not on boards. And our idea is to measure this wave as quickly as possible, transmit a signal back to the Tsunami Warning Center as quickly as possible so we can make a decision as quickly as possible in a matter of about 5 minutes, starting about 5 minutes after the rock has hit the water, to know that we're starting to see a problem, confirming it with the next gauge, and then confirming it once more. And hopefully in there, we're getting that message out to all the alert systems in Alaska. So if you're ever out in that area, probably all you'll see is something that looks like this stuck back in the trees. We've worked very hard with our friends at the Forest Service to make sure that we're not making a big visual spot on the hillside there. Tried to tuck it away in there. If you go back up in the trees a little bit, you'll see a truck box. So if you ever see a truck box with a tsunami sign on it, please leave that alone. The bears don't and the porcupines don't, but inside is the telemetry equipment and the measuring equipment that's sending the signals back to us. You might see a yellow cable kind of plugged into the rocks. And if the tide's way out, you might see kind of a big shiny tube down in the water there. That is a pressure sensor housing that's covering up the sensor itself. So where are the gauges? Point Pakenham is our southernmost point right now. Wouldn't hurt to have more further south, but we really need them as close to the source as possible to get the most time possible. And those extend all the way up to Point Duran, and that's where a lot of the USGS equipment and Alaska Earthquake Center equipment is as well, and closer to the landslide too. What about travel time? Again, we talked about 20 to 22 minutes. Well, this is a nice rainbow colored graphic that I'll annotate for you here. But basically, the red zone is 20 minutes time from the northwestern corner, the top left corner of the map, to Whittier, which is on the left side of the map. And you'll notice Cordova's in blue. We're not really expecting any significant concerns over in Cordova or really for Valdez for that matter. But on top of any wave, we haven't spent a lot of time talking about strong and unusual currents. And that's probably going to be the most significant problem in any part of Prince William Sound, but especially the west side of Prince William Sound. Strong, unusual, damaging currents. It doesn't require a large amplitude wave to disrupt things, but the 7 to 9 knots of current is enough to disrupt shipping operations and perhaps disable vessels with any debris. So once the rock hits the water, we expect about 2 minutes travel time to the first sensor at Point Duran, another 4 minutes down to around the Barry Arm North Shore sensor, and then Point Pakenham was our southernmost sensor at 7 minutes. From that, we expect to see the wave arrive in Whittier around 20 to about 24 minutes maximum. And, whoops, there we go. And then other locations there like Valdez would be closer to about 30 to 40 minutes. Cordova, probably after an hour. Chuniga is right there in the middle, around 30 to 40 minutes as well. And we would expect to see similar conditions there on the west and southern side. But for those channeled areas, all the favorite spots where our kayaking friends like to go, those are going to be pretty tricky spots for currents. And those are hard to model, but we do expect to see some pretty significant impacts there for strong and unusual currents, and that could last for another day or so beyond the initial event. So we're doing something kind of like a moonshot here. That final 15% for the tsunami warning system is pretty tough stuff. Solving the earthquake problem is pretty easy. We have seismographs all across the world. We have tide stations all around the world. But the local tsunami problem is a totally different animal. So to solve this, we need more monitoring stations. We need more resources to have attached to the land to know that it's moving. Cameras, radar, things like that, what Dr. Staley was talking about this morning. All those things are helpful, but we have to tie it into the alert and messaging system that we use up in Palmer at the National Tsunami Warning Center. Some potential scenarios that we think could happen, kind of the range of possibilities here. Maybe even including some of the ideas we've heard in town again. Why not nuke it, right? Can't we just blow it up? Sure. That has other impacts, but, and the ones that our Forest Service friends don't like, I think, right? But what if we had complete failure of the landslide? Natural. A damaging wave reaches Whittier and other locations and the threat goes away. We're done, right? That would be nice to get it out of the way. Or let's go to the other end. No change. Long-term threat. The landslide hangs up there. We know it's a problem. It never goes away. We're monitoring it for generations. Or probably something more likely. A damaging wave reaches Whittier with a partial failure of the landslide, and some threat still remains. Half of the rock falls in, 2/3 of the rock fall in, just a couple pyramids of Giza, right? Yeah, that's probably more likely because our friend Murphy likes to toy with our emotions a little bit, right? So additional concerns that I have, because I'm more concerned about the response side of, what does the city of Whittier do? What do we do on a hot July day when everybody's out in their pleasure craft and the cruise ships in town, or 2 cruise ships now, and the train's loading? How do we handle that? Well, we're going to have a false alarm. Well, I say false alarm. It's probably a true alarm. We're going to have an alarm that is a real alarm, but without an impact, because we see something happening, maybe even just a little bit of rock that makes a wave, and we say, oh, this is it, and hit the button. What's the impact of that? How many times do we get to say something happened and there's no impact in Whittier? I don't know. But there's parables about the boy who cried wolf, and that doesn't turn out so well, right? So we need to be very careful of that. But part of being careful is telling you the honest story, and that it's going to happen, right? This is an experimental service, something that we've never done before, and it's going to take a lot of work and trial and effort. And unfortunately, that comes with a human cost. The communication challenges are certainly there. We're using the cell phone system right now to pass our data along. Anybody that's used a cell phone, period, anybody that's used a cell phone in Alaska, period, knows that's challenging, right? We've got to find a better way to pass that signal through. It's challenging moving communication and data through rural Alaska. But it's a well-known risk. It's not a new risk. We know that landslides create tsunamis anywhere in the world next to water. That's certainly a possibility. And the other thing is, we know Barry Arm is not the only potential for that to happen. In fact, I think Dennis showed you a slide this morning that had many sources across Prince William Sound, and some of those are significant. So what makes this hard for me and for you is just acknowledging and understanding your risk. We can't keep you from going out into Prince William Sound and enjoying it. In fact, I wouldn't dare say that. I like being here today, but I also understand my risk. I know that I need to be paying attention to what is going on around me. I know what my plan is. If there's a tsunami, I'm going to go that way, right? And it takes all of us to have that consistent messaging, whether we're on the cruise ship, whether we're on our local pleasure craft and we're informing our guests. And again, the natural warning signs are probably your best tool there, right? Because our warning system may give you a heads up, but it might not be the same heads up that you can gather together if you're using the natural warning signs around you. So I'm going to skip past this here a little bit. How bad could a buried arm tsunami be? Right now, we think that's going to be around the maximum extent if all the rock drops in the water at once, which is probably a little bit of a stretch, is somewhere on the order of 2 to 3 meters. So that's metric. You multiply it times 3. Never do math live on TV. 3 times 2 is 6, and it's 9. 6 to 9 feet, right? But that's enough to cause impacts there across the coast, and certainly in the harbor. Right here, probably not. Okay, but that will have an impact on vessels, on people, on a cruise ship, and the currents on top of that will be significant. So we're building toward confidence. We need information, and we're set up for something that starts with a seismic problem and ends with more observations along the coast and builds towards higher confidence for our decision makers. This isn't what we're going to be dealing with for the buried arm tsunami problem at all, but we're trying to work around that, and again with the moonshot. So I would encourage you, as you are moving around tsunami country, whether it's Whittier, Cordova, Valdez, anywhere else, especially if you're in communication range, set up your systems to monitor that. You can do that through the National Weather Service. You can talk to me and I'll help you get set up for what your situation is, whether that's a private need, whether that's a corporation need, whether that's an agency need. There's a lot of different solutions there that will fit and scale to what you're talking about. But make sure you know where you are and what your risk is along your coastline there. And then finally, I'll leave you with the tsunami alerts and what that means for you. A warning, of course, is the worst, the big bad. That means we're expecting a tsunami, flooding and dangerous currents are likely, and that means move, get to high ground. An advisory is our lower threshold warning. 1 meter is about the maximum extent that we would expect with a tsunami. So we'll use the advisory for that lower threshold there. It means stay out of the water. And we do expect to see some pretty strong currents with that, but we're not expecting inundation if we say tsunami advisory for your location. A watch simply means that those impacts are a little bit further ahead in time. We are giving you some heads up, and typically that's something that would be coming at us from a long way away. So if we had a Japan earthquake and a tsunami crossing the ocean, we would say watch for Alaska. And an information statement finally is the good news report. Most of the time it means no threat is likely. We expect to see no impact from that. There's an asterisk on that. Sometimes we say that first, like we did with the Hunga eruption, and say, this doesn't look like a big deal because most volcanoes are usually not big deals outside of their region. We used a little word under there saying under evaluation. So we're going to look at this just a little bit more. And then a little bit later, we said tsunami advisory and kind of ratcheted that up when it was clear that something was happening. So use this wherever you are. Stick it on your boat. We've got stickers back of the center. I'd love to send you. So if you need some more information for your group, for your agency, for your ship at sea, please let me know, and I'm happy to serve you. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thanks, Dave. Any questions? Dave?
You have to be signed up for the services to get them before it comes out. I know that we are
Right. So if you're signed up with the Kenai Peninsula Bureau, I think they might use Nixle to pass on their signal. Not sure. But the easiest thing I can tell anybody can use this is the free FEMA app. So just go into the App Store or Android and type in FEMA, and you should get an official app in the store there. Download that. And then you can set that for your location. You can set it up to 5 locations. So, I use it to monitor Anchorage information, but then I also watch the weather down in Central Arkansas where my son's going to school. So, you can set it up for a lot of different places and help grandma out a little bit. Yeah, and it's free.
All right, thanks, Dave.
All right, thank you.
Next up, we'll have concurrent sessions. So online, we have kelp farming in Prince William Sound with Sky Sturvitz. And then in here, we have a tsunami preparedness for shore camping and kayaking, sort of a facilitated discussion with Barbara Leiden and Kale Polete. So we'll get that going right away. And again, if you missed a session, they'll be available on Cloudcast immediately and then on our website in a week or so. So in here, we're talking more tsunamis. Out there, we're talking about kelp farming.